Tomorrow, said Joshua, I've got this really tasty little town lined up. You break in through the front gate, and when the Canaanites come running, we'll burst in through the back. Wallop, no problem. I want to go home, said Caleb. What? I'm fed up with fighting. That's all I've ever done. I've got this girlfriend, see, and she's got this lovely farm, and I just want to settle down and grow stuff. There were murmurs of agreement from all over the camp. Grow stuff? Grow stuff? Yelled Joshua. You're Israelite soldiers, for goodness sake. What about clobbering Canaanites? My girl's a Canaanite. I don't want to clobber her. Or her mum and dad. They're really nice people. Yeah, forget it, Joshua, yelled someone else. There's plenty of room for us, and there's plenty of room for the Canaanites. Live and let live. And the entire camp got up and started packing their donkeys. Joshua and the holy men rushed all over the camp, grabbing people, trying to shake some sense into them. Listen to me, you're Israelites. If you start mixing with the Canaanites, you'll become just like the Canaanites. You'll become ignorant, devious, you'll stop washing under your arms. But no one was listening to a word they were saying. And you'll forget to worship the God of the Israelites. But by now, they were all riding out of the camp. It's all right, Joshua, they shouted. We'll be okay. See ya. Bye. And they disappeared over the horizon. All over Canaan they went, the 12 tribes of the Israelites. Reuben, Judah, Simeon, Issachar, Ephraim, Benjamin, Zebulun, Manasseh, Dan, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. And they spread for miles and miles across the whole land. And they grew stuff. The years went by, Joshua died, and sure enough, the Israelites forgot to worship their God. Why should they bother? The corn god brought them their corn, the rain god brought them their rain. Why should they bother with a grumpy old bossy boots of a god with a load of laws locked in a wooden box? And they got softer and lazier, and the Canaanites rubbed their hands together, and the word went round from one Canaanite city to the next. Free Canaan, a Canaanite homeland for the Canaanite people. Now, in the town of Harosheth, there lived a Canaanite called Sisera, and he was a real swine. At the age of 3, he built a torture chamber for his teddies. At 4, he learned to count by picking the legs off centipedes. But all this paled into insignificance compared with what he wanted to do to the Israelites. He wanted to them. So who better to be general of the Canaanite army than stark, staring, bonkers Sisera? He bought 900 second-hand chariots from a Lebanese chariot salesman. He got all the Canaanites together, and they went all round the country looking for Israelites to duff up. And who was at their head? Sisera, screaming for blood. And what did the Israelites do? They ran off in terror to the hills. And up in the hills, sitting under a palm tree shelling peas, by the side of this enormous old table covered in a raggedy cloth, sat Deborah, the smartest and the very best of all the Israelites. She was settling this row between two extremely hacked-off young women who just discovered that they both got engaged to the same bloke, when suddenly the terrified people came rushing up to her and threw themselves at her feet. "What are we going to do?" they cried. "We'll be wiped out." Deborah closed her eyes, placed her fingers very lightly on the table and began to hum. It was a long, low, quivering hum that went on for about an hour. And then, ting! She opened her eyes again. "Send for Barak," she said in this really weird voice. "Send for the one who will save us." "Send for Barak," went up the cry. "Send for Barak!" And messengers scooted off all over Canaan to look for him. A week later, one of the messengers burst into a bar in Kadesh, where a bunch of young headbangers were singing a song about not being the marrying kind. "Has anyone seen a man called Barak?" the messenger gasped. The biggest, fiercest, drunkest of all the headbangers came lumbering up to him. "Who's asking?" he said. "Deborah," came the reply. "Deborah?" the man crowed. "Who's crummy Deborah when she's at home?" It wasn't the funniest thing in the world to say, but the guy's mates just fell about. She's the best of all the Israelites. She said to tell him that his people are in trouble. They need his help. Do they? Said the man. Well, well, crummy well. And he picked up a bucket of water and he tipped it right over his head. Sober up, lads, he said. Looks like I've been asked for by a lady. When they got to the hills, they found Deborah sat under her crummy palm tree, looking like some sort of crummy school teacher, with the Israelites dotted all around like a bunch of petrified rabbits. Barak's men started to giggle. They laughed and laughed till the tears ran down their faces. But Deborah didn't seem to find it all that funny. Sisera killed 200 Israelites yesterday from the tribe of Naphtali, your tribe. Is that so hysterical? No, replied Barak, not particularly. We need someone to lead us, she continued, who knows no fear. Will you do it? You're joking. You'll win a famous victory. That's stupid, said Barak. Really crummy dumb. Crummy Sisera has got 900 crummy chariots. They'll thrash us. They'll smash us to pieces. No, he and his army will be utterly destroyed. Who says? Deborah whipped the tatty cloth off the table. Only it wasn't a table at all. It was the God box, the half-forgotten holy box which the Israelites had been lugging around with them for centuries, ever since they'd escaped from Egypt. The people dropped to their knees. Barak and his headbangers dropped to their knees. And Deborah started to speak in her weird voice. You will bring your men to the slopes of Mount Tabor, she said. You will wait for Sisera. His army will come to the river below. They will all die, every one. Barak thought about it. Yeah, he knew how to fight. He knew how to lead men in a scrap. But why should he put his neck on the line while this stupid bird sat under a crummy palm tree? I'll go, he said, if you go. Deborah smiled. You won't go alone? No way. Then you'll receive no credit for the victory. Sisera will die at the hands of a woman. When Sisera heard that there were Israelites on Mount Tabor, he smiled. It wasn't a particularly nice sort of smile, more the sort of thing you'd associate with a psychologically disturbed crocodile. But at least it was a smile. Oh, good, he said. Let's go and keep the peace, shall we? And he called up his 900 chariots and his spears and his clubs and his cattle prods and drove out to meet the Israelites. Barak watched them coming with that we're in charge, you're just scum look on their faces. Then he nodded and ping! A stone hit the leading vehicle. Ping, ping! More stones rained down. It's just kids, sneered Sisera. Drive on, but more Israelites rose up, and more, and they were hurling everything they could at the Canaanites. Smash! A windscreen broke. Pull over to the left, said Sisera. There, by the river bank. We don't want any unnecessary casualties. 900 chariots swung over to the left, and 900 chariots got stuck in the mud. A look came over Sisera's face like the one he used to give his teddies. Come on, you cretinous worms, he shouted. Get out and push. And as the Canaanites pushed and shoved and heaved at their second-hand chariots, a roar of triumph arose from Mount Tabor as the Israelites came racing down the hillside, just aching for some serious aggravation. You couldn't really call it a battle. It was more like a rugby match. Push, kick, bite, but then Sisera's entire army toppled into the river, weighed down by the weight of their armour. There was the whinnying of horses, frightened yells, and triumphant cries as the Israelites raced up and down the bank, spearing anyone who tried to get out. Barak's mates yelled, "We've done it! We've totally crummy hammered them!" And they lifted Barak up onto their shoulders. "You jammy crummer," they shouted, "you'll be famous forever!" Sisera flayed about in the river, coughing water and spitting hate. Then he grabbed a dagger off a passing body, hacked off his armour, dived deep and began to swim. A few miles downstream, a little cluster of refugees were camped under the trees. Poor farmers who'd been kicked off the land by the Canaanites and now just squatted anywhere they could. Sisera swam to the riverbank and watched them. Thunk, thunk. A little old lady was shuffling round her tent, hammering tent pegs into the ground with a wooden mallet. Sisera heaved himself up onto the bank and staggered forward, shivering with exhaustion. "Help me!" he gasped. "Oh, you poor dear," said the little old lady. "Don't you poor dear me, you revolting bag of pus. I'm General Sisera," said the general haughtily. "Are you, my dear? Are you indeed? Well, you come inside and have a nice lie down." The general blundered into the tent. Thunk, thunk. The old lady was still hammering in her tent pegs. Thunk, thunk. It was the last sound General Sisera heard before he fell into a deep sleep. Thunk, thunk. It was the last sound General Sisera heard, full stop. The old lady lifted the tent flap and went inside. Thunk, 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 thunk. The sound rang round the camp. The refugees looked at each other and shuddered. Later that day, the Israelites arrived, but none of them dared go into the tent. Then Deborah pushed her way through the throng and opened the flap. Everyone waited. Then she came out again, holding a blooded tent peg. And as her men dragged Sisera's broken body out of the tent and dumped him in the river, Deborah began to sing, and Barak began to sing, and the little old lady began to sing, and the hills rang to the sound of their voices. Back in the city of the Canaanites, Sisera's mum was getting a bit restless. He should have been back hours ago. "Don't worry," said her next-door neighbour. "You know what these boys are like after a punch-up. A few drinks, a couple of slave girls, a bit of torture. Let him enjoy himself." Then their faces turned pale. Far away, they could hear the sound of the Israelites singing a song of triumph. They sang of Barak's victory. They sang of Deborah's victory. But one song they kept singing over and over again. The song of the little old lady and what she'd done with her tent peg.